And a free chair, write to Disney Books Offer, Box 1000, 444 Robson Street, or call 685-2055. That's 685-2055. Don't forget to name the famous mouse and get 3 Disney books for just $2.
BCTV! Our best show.
Good morning. Oh, yeah. Shakespeare is dead. Byron is mouldering in his grave. Milton and Hemingway have long gone, and to tell you the truth, I don't feel so good myself this morning. The fact of the matter is that since the Webster show came back on the air 3 full weeks ago, I've been involved in nothing but unrelenting doom and gloom. Cuts and crises, crises and cuts. And I'm going to try and ignore, at least for this morning, that Bennett is meeting with the teachers and with Bejan to try and solve out the latest near-hysterical crisis in British Columbia. I'm going to try and ignore, at least for today, the fact that W.A.C. Bennett, wherever he is, God bless him, is shuddering as his boy issues these damnable treasury bills for short-term borrowing. In fact, there's nothing wrong with them, but we just don't know how broke we are or might be. So, disassociated from anything else on the program this morning, I'm going to open the show with a mystery guest and a surprise. Otherwise on the program, however, I have my usual bevy of VIPs. Senator Ed Lawson, Canadian Director of the Teamsters Union, and also a senator who is presently trying to organize the Parliament Hill mob. Not the senators, they're well organized, the little people. And then, because one must attend to Old Clothes and Porridge, Brian Rolfe is here this morning to try and justify what I presume is his outrage at cuts in legal aid. Maybe legal aid is as feather-bedded as some of the school board offices are. And again, a story which I predict will develop and go across the country, the sad situation that Carlisle Ryton, a film processor of Penticton, finds himself in the Federal Exchequer Federal Court in Vancouver because of the fact that he can't or won't read French or get his documents when he wanted them in English. He's got problems. But first, the surprise, the laughing, happy surprise after the break. I've just suffered an attack of cold feet. In other words, I chickened out in the way I was going to do this thing. I was going to steal, plagiarize, some material made in a speech in Ottawa by Senator Ed Lawson. Now, to whom were you speaking and who was present?
To the Canadian Federation of Labour. And this is the organization of the building trades that left the Canadian Labour Congress.
Right.
They had their founding convention of the new Canadian Federation of Labour earlier this year.
And instead of concentrating merely on the heavy industrial topics, you decided, I believe, to give Oscar awards.
Yes, political Oscar awards.
A notable Oscar award.
Yes.
Well, in that case, Mr. Lawson, I shall give the category and you will give the reason for the award. And the first one is for the Best Actor. Best Actor, Pierre Trudeau, in a long-running series.
Pierre Trudeau for the movie Chariots of Fire. It's a story of the ruler of the kingdom's train ride across the country to determine if marketing boards have created a surplus of fruits and vegetables. He was also nominated for Goldfinger, but was beaten out by James Bond.
Do you know why did he win the nomination for Goldfinger?
No, he didn't get the he didn't win for the Goldfinger because there was a misunderstanding. People thought he was giving the people of British Columbia a sign, and he was really answering his aide who said, "Prime Minister, do you want a table in the dining car?" And he said, "Yes, please, a table for one." And people misunderstood.
Your next nomination is for the second best actor in Canada today.
Oh, Joe Clark for the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a story of a young man from the West who finds the map to Treasure City, finds Treasure City, but loses everything when he accidentally sets fire to the only combination of the vault when his aides tell him the paper it's written on is fireproof.
The best supporting actor.
Ed Broadbent for the movie Reds. It's a story of an angry but caring socialist who will do anything for the workers except become one.
The best actress.
Margaret Trudeau for the movie Goodbye Girl. It's a story of a beautiful and talented actress who resents the invasion of her privacy and gives it all up to become a social worker and opens a halfway house for girls who won't go all the way.
Best director.
Oh, best director of a foreign film, René Lévesque, for the movie Let My People Go. It's a story of a backwards boy from Quebec who goes to London to see the Queen, but is accidentally run over by a double-decker bilingual bus when he fails to read the signs which are in English only.
Best supporting actor.
Oh, Alan McEachran, best supporting actor in a starring role for the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it's the story of a slightly mad maritimer's attempt to launch a craft into space. The project fails when it goes over budget. It has a faulty transmission, 1 speed forward, 3 in reverse. I should also tell you, just to digress a moment, but McEachran, there's a tradition in Ottawa when the finance minister brings down the budget. He usually takes a short holiday. In fact, he gets out of town. And McEachran, who is from Cape Breton, went to Newfoundland on a little holiday. They took him on a fishing trip. They flew him into a remote lake, and they said, "Now, Mr. McEachran, we'll pick you up in 2 days. And remember, 1 moose. We can only take off with 1 moose." Well, the pilot comes back in 2 days, and here's McEachran with 2 moose. And the pilot said, "I told you we can only take off with 1 moose." McEachran said, "Look, I talked to the guide. He said when you took off with Crosby, when he was finance minister, you took off with 2 moose. You'll take off with me with 2 moose." And the pilot said, "Well, now let me explain." He said, "No explanations. You took off with Crosby, you take off with me." So they take off, get about 1,000 yards in the air, and crash into the trees. And the pilot said, "Mr. McEachran, you all right?" McEachran said, "Yes." "You have any idea where we are?" He said, "Yes, about 300 yards from where I crashed with Crosby."
Enough, really. We shouldn't be doing this kind of thing on the air at 9 o'clock in the morning. But I'm surprised you didn't give Lalonde a nomination for anything at all.
Yes, there was Marc Lalonde for the movie Caligula. And it's a story of a young French-Canadian from the East who battles the corporate giants of the oil and gas industry in Alberta. And after it's finished and he wins, he's asked why did he single-handedly destroy the energy industry, and his response was, "So I rape and pillage a little. It's a living."
Not provincial nominations?
Well, we didn't have any for starring roles, but there were a number of nominations in the province for Best Original Story, which was suitably adapted to the screen. And the nominees were Who's Afraid of Evan Wolfe by John Fryer, Love Me Tenure by Dr. Pat McGeer,
Love Me Tenure.
I Created a Blackboard Jungle by Bill Van der Zem, Catch Me If You Can by Peter Heinemann. There were a couple of late entries, Let Them Eat What by Grace McCarthy, How to Break the Bank by Gary Locke, and then there was one other, Lies My Father Told Me by Bill Bennett.
Ed Lawson, Senator Lawson. We'll take a break and come back without the giggles in our face. One of the reasons I asked Senator Lawson to appear this morning was because of the widespread coverage given to what seems to be a most unusual organization you're trying to put into a union. which I have called with some lack of majesty the Parliament Hill mob. Now, seriously, why would you try to organize a new union on Parliament Hill when we faced many stories about lack of proper management, waste, and not so much feather bedding, but inefficient operation of the Houses of Commons and the Senate itself? What are you trying to do?
We're trying to improve all of that.
No, but in a time of restraint. Here we are, you're going for another union contract, you'll probably get it, and way up go the costs again.
No, what you have to do is understand what takes place. Most people, I think, in the country thought all of the Parliament Hill employees were organized, either in the public service unions of one kind or another. What most people don't understand is that this group of employees, and here you're talking about cafeteria employees, maintenance, bus drivers, messengers, and so on, for years have been disqualified from bargaining rights. They're not covered by the Canada Labour Code. They're not covered by the Public Service Staff Relations Act. So they're in a kind of a no man's land. Now, I'm not talking about the secretaries to members of the House of Commons.
Because they're employed separately by those members of the House of Commons, and they're obviously confidential employees who should not be unionized.
And should not be organized. And
so all the Senate staff and the House of Commons staff can't be unionized. The personal staff to the ministers and whatnot.
Yes.
And members.
But technically, all of these other employees who are ordinary workers doing some very important functions around there are technically employees of the Speaker and right of the Crown. And they have been unorganized for these many years, and they finally decided that they want to have some basic, simple collective bargaining. Now, we told them at the outset, if we're going to get involved as the Teamsters Union, that the first thing we're going to insist on, you must surrender your right to strike. We could not be party to organizing a group and attempting to hold Parliament to ransom. That we simply could not do, and you must be prepared to accept binding conciliation or binding arbitration. Now, we have that undertaking from the group that we're dealing with. And then we said we would organize, and if we could get a significant majority, and I'm talking about at least 2/3 or 70%, because I guarantee you that as soon as it's known that we're involved, which it now is, that all of the other public service unions that ignored these workers for all these years, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, will all suddenly come out of the woodwork and say, we were organizing them, and why are you coming in? Well, the fact of the matter is, these people are unorganized, they do not have any bargaining rights, they don't have the simple basic grievance procedure, and they want to have a union, a normal business-like
Well, you've
trade
answered
union.
you are now about to be accused of raiding the jurisdiction of the Public Service Union.
Well, that would be an incorrect charge, because they're unorganized and the people are free to select the union of their choice.
But I would have imagined, surely you've examined some of the wages and working conditions, that they get parallel wages and working conditions with the public service unions in Canada.
Well, no, they don't, and they don't have any job security in the sense as far as seniority rights or any of the normal grievances that they may have. There's no procedure whatever for dealing with those, other than there's a committee. It makes provision in the legislation for a committee with the Speaker and some members of the House of Commons to deal with this on a kind of an ad hoc basis.
Well, tell me, is there legislative freedom for you to organize them, or does the present statute prevent, on the face of it, organization?
Well, I asked the legal department in Ottawa to give us a report on this, and it indicates, in effect, that they're disqualified under all present legislation. But at the same time, under the new Constitution, which Parliament adopted,
Oh, here we go again.
it guarantees the right of free association of all workers. So how can Parliament adopt a new Constitution guaranteeing the right of free association for all workers in Canada while denying workers in Parliament Hill
How
the
many
right
are
of free
there?
association?
1,500?
Approximately 1,500.
But how many approached you? A dozen?
Oh, no, we have a goodly number who have indicated that they want to be organized. And my position and our position is very simple. We have issued a charter to the original committee who say that they want to be organized and that there's significant support. If we don't, and if they don't demonstrate significant support, more than 2/3, we're simply going to take a walk and say then we don't want to be involved. Because if this ultimately goes to a vote, which we hope it does, and then we want to be certain that we're going to win the vote. If it turns out we don't have their support, we're quite prepared to turn our files and records or to whatever other association they want to be involved with.
Fair enough. I suppose you can't avoid union organization, and there's no point in trying to go and restrain your lowest paid people.
Well, that's right. And you're talking some very low-paid workers here. And I would think that the Speaker or the House of Commons, whomever is responsible as the administrators of these employees, that they must be somewhat embarrassed by having their own employees in this particular situation. And if necessary, we would ultimately go to a test case. If we can't get voluntary recognition, or if we can't get bargaining rights under the Canada
Deal
Code,
with the Speaker?
we would have to deal through the Speaker and probably a committee of the House. I suspect, from what I read about the law involved, that it would require legislation to grant them bargaining rights. But if necessary, we would be prepared, if we had majority support of the workers involved, to make a test case under the Constitution as to their legal right for free association.
This Constitution, you know, is going to drive us crazy. Did you happen to notice that one union in British Columbia is claiming the government does not have power to cut services or to take away jobs because it's an infringement of the Charter of Rights.
Well, I imagine there'll be all kinds of cases like that, but I would think that cases that go to the basic freedoms guaranteed under the Constitution are cases that should be tested in the courts.
All right, now I've had the views on the economic state of this nation from all kinds of labor leaders, B.C. Fad, Calvert Knudsen. They're all very depressing. How badly has the Teamsters Union been hit, one across the country and two in British Columbia, by the downturn in the economy?
We've been severely hit by it, especially in eastern Canada in transportation, not to minimize what's happening here, but in eastern Canada, as you know, many of the companies in Ontario and Quebec interline with the American companies, and deregulation in the United States has had a devastating effect on the transportation industry.
What do you mean deregulation in the United States?
They had that law that they passed a couple of years ago that
Oh,
allowed
yes.
no regulation of the motor transport industry, no regulation. The net result is it wound up driving, I would say, almost the majority of the major carriers out of business, certainly the middle line carriers out of business, and replaced them with tens of thousands of individual owner-operators.
But it doesn't the same thing apply in British Columbia to some extent?
To a large degree that's happening here, but we still have some regulation, we still have some controls, and it would be a serious mistake in Canada and a serious mistake in British Columbia to deregulate the industry. The net result, they set out to provide greater competition, but what's happened, the middle companies are being wiped out. 8 or 10 of the major conglomerates, the major carriers, are going to have control of the industry with tens of thousands of owner-operators driving 20 hours a day, using no-dose pills. There'll be carnage on the highways like you wouldn't believe, and you're not going to have what they set out to have, which is free competition in the trucking industry. You're going to have absolute chaos and disorder.
Well, can't the much vaunted, powerful Teamsters Union put a stop to that?
Well, the difficulty in Canada, as you know, we don't have like what they have under ICC in the United States, like one set of regulations covering everything. We have the federal legislation, which covers a percentage of interprovincial transportation, and then every province has their own set of rules. So what we have to guard against is that every province has a committee of theorists or academics saying, wouldn't it be wonderful to deregulate? So it's a full-time occupation.
How much has your per capita dropped, though? Can you give me an idea of how much the unemployment has hit the union funds? Because I know that the BC Fed and the IWA and all these other people with thousands of unemployed are suffering financially. How about you?
The surprising part, our international in North America is divided into 5 parts, 4 sections in the United States, eastern, western, central, and southern. In the 4 sections in the United States, we're down on a 2 million membership about 300,000 to 400,000 as a result of deregulation and the economy. The surprising part in Canada, nationally I'm talking about now, is that we're up about 5% as far as total membership. Now, that's not to minimize that we have had a lot of layoffs in a lot of industries. We're having a lot of that. We're also doing a lot of organizing. So membership total in Canada is up. We're the only section of the international that's showing a gain. But we have had some serious downturns in the transportation industry and many other industries.
More with Ed Lawson of the Teamsters after the break. Right, Dennis McDermott, the leader of the Canadian Labour Congress, has modified his attitude towards cooperation with the government on wage restraint. Where does Ed Lawson, spokesman for 100,000 Canadian Teamsters, stand on the federal 6 and 5 program?
Well, we're in somewhat of an awkward position there. As a general proposition, we're opposed to guidelines because they've never been fairly applied. When we had the guidelines or the pay board or whatever they call it, the controls
AIB.
before, yes, it was pay controls, wage controls. It was not any control of prices. We've said as a matter of national policy in the Teamsters that if the government is prepared to bring down any kind of controls or guidelines that are going to apply fairly to all sections of the economic community, that we'd be quite prepared to assume our share of the sacrifice. But we're not satisfied that that's going to apply.
But does that mean, though, your contracts now in your national trucking business, you must accept the 6% and 5%? No.
No, we're not required.
You're not public sector wages.
No, but we do have some. We have some companies that are trucking companies that are owned and controlled by the railroad, and some of the railroad companies are under the 6 and 5%, and we're caught up with that.
What about this big Maitland transport deal? Did you not agree to a cut or of some kind?
Yes.
When the federal government moved in to subsidize with how much Maitland transport?
Maitland received federal guarantees, loan guarantees, and financial assistance of about $34 million.
How many employees?
We have about 2,000 in Canada. And they're a Quebec-based operation, a long-time, well-established Canadian operation. They have about 4,000 employees in the United States as well.
They were going down the tube until they got these guarantees.
Yes.
$34 million.
They got $34 million, but one of the conditions that the federal government imposed, they said we must have a commitment from your union, which is us, the Teamsters Union, that they will not exceed the guidelines of 6 and 5% if you're going to get these guarantees. Now, we gave the commitment, I gave the commitment, that we would work within that framework. And I have no hesitation in recommending to our locals involved in Ontario and Quebec that they not exceed the 6 and 5% guidelines to keep that company alive. The jobs were that important to us and to the economy that we did agree to the 6 and 5% guidelines.
So therefore, in that case, 2,000 employees, truckers, and the federal guarantee for $34 million, you did say,
yes,
we commit them. And
yes,
of course, you had the union vote first to approve your action.
No.
What?
No.
No.
We had something like about 72 hours to make a decision while this matter was before Cabinet as to whether we were going to agree or disagree.
So if you had disagreed, they wouldn't have got the $34 million.
And all the jobs would have been gone. So we agree, that's what leadership's all about, once in a while having to make difficult decisions. We made the decision, and then the interesting thing is that after I made the decision, and then the locals involved, and I counseled with them, they called a press conference in support of the position, the 6 and 5%, and then the television station in Montreal went out and interviewed many of the drivers and said, did your leaders do the right thing by making this decision? And without exception, every employee said, we would have agreed to no wage increase simply to keep our jobs and keep this company alive. So every case must be dealt with on its own merits.
You wouldn't say broadly, now is the time for people not to go for increases?
No, I think that every case has to be decided on its own merits. There are some industries, some areas where good judgment would tell you, common sense would tell you, you should not be seeking large increases, and in some cases you shouldn't be seeking any increases. There are situations like that. But there are also companies and industries who are doing very well and who owe it to their employees to help them keep pace with inflation. So you can't have any blanket rule. It simply doesn't, it can't apply to an organization as versatile as ours, representing everything from security guards to technicians to truck drivers to warehousemen to office employees and so on. You can't make a blanket rule.
Briefly on the broad labor situation now. Labor is splintered in this country, is it not? How many major organizations are there now, apart from the Canadian Labour Congress?
Well, you have the Canadian Labour Congress, and they represent about 58% of the organized workforce in Canada. You now have the Canadian Federation of Labour, which is primarily the building trades and others who split from the Canadian Labour Congress. Then you have about 1.5 million workers, organized workers, that are not in the Congress across the country.
And then you've got the Teamsters, which is not in the Congress.
That's right.
But you're in the Canadian Federation of Labour.
No, we're not in anything. We're still an independent organization. We have a close association with the Canadian Federation of Labour because we're in the building trades and we work with them. But there's no question about it. The labor movement in Canada is splintered and split and doesn't have any kind of a cohesive policy. Everybody kind of doing their own thing, going their own way. On the first question, I don't want to duck your first question about McDermott modifying his position of cooperating with the government. I think we have an obligation as trade unions to cooperate with the government. At this Canadian Federation of Labour, when I was speaking, I said that if it was necessary to start these mega projects, if we as the building trades or as the Teamsters had to give guarantees to go to the peace power type 10-year no-strike contracts, we should march up the hill, sit down with the government and say, if that's what's going to put our people to work, by God, we're prepared to sign those kinds of contracts.
Senator Lawson, well do you know that when W.A.C. Bennett started the Peace Power Project and called in the international unions, of which you were one.
I was there.
And you gave a 10-year no-strike guarantee.
Right.
But you got guaranteed wage increases.
Yes.
All the way through. You picked up everything else. Was that not the biggest single factor, far more than the St. Lawrence Seaway, which led to our incredible escalation of costs in British Columbia?
No, I don't agree with that. I think that was the greatest period of economic growth and stability we ever had in this province.
When will it be back, that period?
Well, hopefully very soon, if we can have, I think, all segments of the economic community kind of come together and recognize that we're in a very serious problem and act sensibly and responsibly, I think that we can all pull together and make it happen.
Trucker phoned me yesterday from Dawson Creek. Been 8 years in Dawson Creek. Was almost guaranteed a job for his truck in Dawson Creek on the Tumble Ridge town site, right? He turns up, he has his cab all fixed up and all the rest of it, and here are trucks from Vancouver and Victoria called in by the project. The local guy, he's going to go belly up. Now, why can't you, and I ran into this on the Revelstoke Dam too in a smaller way, local people not being hired. Now, this man who can't get on the job is a Teamster lease-operated, you know, what do you call these things?
Owner-operator.
Owner-operator.
Independent trucker, yes.
Right, 2 trucks, one off the road at the moment, one on the road. Operates through a lease. Should there not be some priority for a proportion of the vehicles in Tumble Ridge to be hired from the north.
Yes. And as a general proposition, this is the same business we went through before about dispatch halls and hiring and so on.
Well, that's what caused all the noise in the peace at one time.
Well, our locals, all of the locals, whether it's our union or the building traders and so on, in most cases, but let's talk about the Teamsters Union. We have a contract that has a hiring procedure both for employees and for truckers. And it's for a very orderly procedure. But what you'll find, this man may have a very legitimate case. And if he has, then that can be reviewed and looked at to see whether he's been badly treated. But for every case you'll find of somebody who's been there in Dawson Creek, you'll find 100 cases of people coming in from Manitoba or Alberta or so on who are instant local hires and want to replace BC truckers who have been down here waiting to go to work. And that's equally unfair. And so every case on its merits, as a general proposition, we have to operate within those contracts and take care of those people who are members, legitimate members. If there are legitimate local hires who are members, they will be taken care
Who
of.
will my friend from Dawson Creek contact?
John Donaldson, who is the business manager of Local 213, or his assistant, Don McGill.
Can I tell him that Lawson told him to call?
Yes, yes.
One segment of calls with Ed Lawson after the break. What am I doing? Senator Ed Lawson, did you answer me crisply on the wage cut? You say each and every one, but you're prepared to live with restraint.
Yes. Each case on its merits.
Each case on its merits. Go ahead to Senator Ed Lawson.
Congratulations, gentlemen. I enjoyed your comedy skit and had a good belly laugh.
Good.
Thank you.
I hope the BC TV picks it up, and also I hope the national ZTV picks it up and puts it on. I think we need a good laugh in this country. My parting remark is, as far as the Liberal government is concerned, never have so few taken so much from so many. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We could use them.
Song and dance team next. Senator Lawson, go ahead, please.
This is me.
That's you.
I just wanted to sort of defend some of the truckers in the United States that Ed Lawson just dumped all over. He made an insinuation about deregulation in the United States causing carnage and truck drivers taking pills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He never mentioned the fact that shipping prices have gone down. Never said anything about the husband and wife teams who are really good family people who now can afford to get into a business by buying their own truck and not having somebody put the thumb on them and tell them what to do and when to do it. And he also mentioned something about the fact that the Americans don't have any regulations in one breath, and then a couple of minutes later he said, well, we need something like the ICC up here in Canada.
So we don't have any.
And he's been talking about the rights of all the union people and things like that, but he's never talked about any of the rights of the people that don't want to be the union people, that want to drive their own trucks.
Okay, sir. Senator Lawson.
Well, the only response to that, for every case that you're talking about where there's a husband and wife team or a trucker who's now in business and doing very well, I'll give you 10,000 of them now who are in business long enough to buy a truck. They go for 2 or 3 months, they can't make the payments, they lose the truck and they start all over again. For every case you can give like that, I'll give you 10,000 cases of heartbreak and people, individuals like you, losing their truck, losing their family savings, and who can't function. We had 9 companies go under, 9 pretty good-sized companies go under.
Well, you say that you should protect those that don't have enough business sense to keep their business head above water, and you should unionize them and have them run trucking companies.
No, I think you're kind of making it a little simple. We had 9 companies go under with 26,000 employees, and there's been about 25,000 new licenses issued at the same time. When you're talking about all these individuals, and they're only in business long enough to hurt the legitimate operator. And you'll find as you're going along with these lower rates that the minute one of these owner-operators gets a little tough to make a payment because he blows a tire or has an accident, he's going to be in at your company if you don't have a long-term contract, and he'll be undercutting you and he'll put you out of business. And that's happening hundreds and hundreds of cases each day in the United States today.
Question, you are an American. Where do you truck?
Tennessee.
Kansas City.
No,
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
What the devil are you doing phoning this program?
Well, I'm up here on a hall.
On a hall.
I'm just looking at your handsome face here on the telly.
Jolly good for you. He's a mountain man from Tennessee.
That's right.
Okay, boy, go shoot me a bar.
The carnage. Tell me about the carnage.
Well, I'll tell you, we'll give you hundreds and hundreds of documented cases, and if you're on the road a lot, you know it to be so.
Enough of that one. I've got to go to the next call. Go ahead from Cranbrook.
Yeah, Senator Ed Lawson.
Yes, good morning.
Yeah, I used to be, I'm a suspended Teamster member, okay? I moved here to Cranbrook. I'm an owner-operator gravel truck. And I've been trying for over a year to try and get into the union. I go out and I find union jobs, and I've been trying, like I say, I've been trying to get in the union, but I keep getting this here thing that they're not taking on any members. Like I find all kinds of work, but there again, like Tumbler Ridge, people from the coast are coming up and taking the jobs away. I've been harassed by the Teamsters. I don't know, I feel that I'm being discriminated against because I feel that there should be, but there's not a law saying that I can't join a labor organization if I want to.
Well, I think you answered your own question when you started off by saying you're a suspended member.
Wait a minute, that's been through harassment. I'd like to speak to Jack Webster about that someday.
Well, I'd like to hear all your full story sometime, but it's generally pretty unsatisfactory. Why were you suspended?
Well, I was working for a company in Vancouver. I was laid off. I went down to hiring hall, and I put my name on the work list, like, you know, I did the normal procedures, and I seen fellows going out ahead of me, qualified for, you know...
You had a dispute. I'm afraid I'm going to have...
He didn't pay his dues. Yeah, his main reason he was suspended is he didn't pay his dues, and it's that simple.
Wait a minute. The reason why I didn't pay the dues is because I started getting phone calls at home stating that if I didn't, my health was going to be in jeopardy.
Oh, well, that's a lot of nonsense. The reason you're suspended and the reason you're not on the job is you didn't pay your dues, and the union has a very simple policy. The members who stay and pay their dues and are full-time active members go to work ahead of people who are suspended. It's just that simple.
Phone John Donaldson. Hold on a second. I'll take his number just in case. Go ahead, please.
I mean, that's absolute rubbish to talk about. He gets phone calls at home that this is going to happen, that's going to happen. If he pays his dues, like the rest of the members, he'll be shipped out in rotation on a very closely watched, orderly system.
But mind you, that rotation might not include the local truckers if he happens to be up in...
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Go ahead, please.
Hello there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to say a few things here about this thing he's talking. I'm a dependent contractor myself, Local 213, and he was saying where this guy up there in Tumbler Ridge, it's, you know, if a guy has the know-how or the contacts, and if I could go up there, if I knew somebody that was a contractor up there, and he'd offered to give me a job, he gets my licensing for me up there, I'd go up there and work, and I'm sure the same guy that's up in Tumbler Ridge, if there was a big job down here, and he knew some contractor that was down here working, he came down here and worked right next door to me, and I wasn't working, I'm sure he wouldn't give up his job.
That's the other side of the coin. I appreciate the call because that's the other side of the coin. It's always so simple, but you know, we have local offices throughout the province in the construction local to deal with these kinds of situations as fairly as can be. And the dispatching is so closely monitored by our own people, by members and so on to make sure it's fairly applied. But this is the other side of the coin, what this gentleman's talking about.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is Brother Al McDonald, Local 31, Ed.
Hello,
Yes.
Brother Al.
Listen, I just got laid off not too long ago from Langley Freight, and I got a letter from them saying that if I had a Class 1 license, upgrade to a Class 1, I'd be working. And so I took it to Manpower, hoping to get a little bit of assistance from them. And they said that they won't upgrade me. They'll give me a course as a hairdresser or a barber, which there's hundreds and hundreds of them sitting on their ass doing nothing up in every beauty shop you go into. Things like that. This is the way the government's operating there. Help a person go back to work. And I've been, you know, knocking around the truck for 17 years. And
Well, they want to improve the appearance of the unemployed. But what you should do, go and see 213 because they have their own training facility, their own training school, and see if they can't make their facilities available to upgrade you.
well, I'll say you said so.
Yes.
I'll tell John Donaldson
Go
at
see-
213 you said so.
That's right. They have some pretty expensive equipment on that joint training program just for that express purpose of upgrading our own people. So go and have a talk to them.
Thanks, Brother Al.
Right.
In the Teamsters, you call him brother.
Yes.
Not comrade.
No.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning, Ed. It's Bob McEwen.
Yes, good morning.
Also. Listen, Jack, there's a couple of points that Ed has made there, but I don't think he's fully explained on our 213 dispatch system.
Right.
We found in the past, we're going back a few years now with your Revelstoke Dam and et cetera, that they had a local hire policy, and what we found at that time is every single person became aware of a major project going on in northeast BC or wherever it was, they'd immediately become local residents.
That's right.
That left the married man in Vancouver, who was sitting on the list, in a very precarious position. And so the union had to take some type of, they had to tighten the system up to help all brothers equally. Because, you know, if I was single, I could run like hell to Revelstoke and be a local resident. And I would get priority on that job. So they seen fit to step on this, and quite rightly so. The second to do with driver owners, and I have been a driver owner also. It's not unusual in our union to put get a person who wants to get in the union to say he owns a truck. And 2 months later he doesn't own a truck, and all of a sudden he's a full-fledged member and he wants to go driving. And that's a back door that I'm sure Ed's quite aware of, every union member is quite aware of.
I've been through that before, the back door way of getting in.
They use it to get into a union that's in fact a closed shop and has been for many, many years and should remain so. And I think those points should be explained to, all respect to independent truckers and to my brothers Teamsters. But they do play games as well as any other union, and it's up to our executives to jump all over them when they start playing those games. That's all I got to say.
Those are two very valid points that Bob is making, because anybody can go to one of these trucking companies and put $50 down or maybe nothing down, just take over the payments. So now he's an owner-operator, he's in the business, he comes in and says, I have to have a membership to go on a job. The finance company takes the truck back, just as Bob says, 30 or 60 days later, but now he's a full-fledged member and he wants to be in. It is a backdoor way that they've used to get in, and the members involved, the long-time members, say no.
You're in a more difficult position perhaps than the industrial union in that they've got their people more or less surrounded by a wall.
That's right.
Whereas yours are operating on these truck lease contracts.
Yes, and then you have cases like the other point that Bob mentioned about local hires. I remember going to Dawson Creek on the Fort St. John paving job, and here was a company called Leo's Trucking with 15 or 20 employees, and they had the tarps they used to cover the blacktop, those filthy things. They had them strung over poles, and they were sleeping under these. And I said, wait a moment. Up here in British Columbia, we have room and board with running water and so on. You're going to have to change these. He said, if you want running water, the Peace River's full of it. Now, we sent him back to Manitoba, which upset a lot of people, and we got a call from the Minister of Labor and said, you can't do things like this. Well, we don't want people coming in trying to break down established conditions that BC workers have established over a lot of years. So we do these kinds of things, then you get the flack we're being discriminated against.
But you must concede that in a big thing like Tumbler Ridge, in the town side, there's got to be room for non-union people to get some of the work.
Oh, yes, you have to do that. But when you're talking about trucking, you have this great movement. Everybody's got a relative. Suddenly they're longtime residents, and even the industry generally, the construction industry has had to have certain basic rules, a minimum pre-residence qualification of so many months so that you're a legitimate local resident, not skipping up there to undermine the opportunity of people who've been waiting and working, waiting to work.
Blunt political question. Roy McGarry, the publisher of the Globe, said yesterday Trudeau must go. I think most of Western Canada feels that he's got to go, that he's a failure. What does Ed Lawson feel? Do you think that Trudeau should retire and get out of the way for a new broom of any kind?
Well, I've come to the conclusion by going all across the country that it really wouldn't matter what kind of a proposal that Prime Minister Trudeau put forward before the people of Canada. You reach a stage where you have the kiss of death or the mark of a loser or whatever it is. You reach a point where it doesn't matter what you propose, you simply can't obtain the confidence of the people to support it. And I'm afraid that Prime Minister Trudeau has reached that stage where he has great difficulty obtaining the confidence of the people. And what people want are new leaders, new faces, new confidence, new optimism. And I think that's going to be very necessary before we're going to have the sufficient confidence in the country to turn the economy around.
Now, did you tell me Trudeau should go or not?
Well, I tell you, that's awfully clear. I think that I've told you that I think he's lost his ability to have the confidence of the people.
And should go.
And when you lose that, if the country's going to turn around, then Trudeau should not delay his retirement.
My thanks to Senator Ed Lawson. Next, Brian Ralph of Legal Aid. Thanks, Ed.
Okay.
20 years ago, the lack of legal aid for poor people in British Columbia was an unmitigated scandal. There was legal aid by the bar. There was court-directed legal aid in major trials. But I have seen, maybe I've told you this before, I've been at a hearing where a man was put away for preventive detention for life and he wasn't even there and he didn't have a lawyer. However, that's long gone. But has legal aid got out of hand? Should legal aid suffer in the present restraint cuts? Brian Ralph is the director of the Legal Services Society of British Columbia and knows whereof he speaks, I am sure. You were not, I presume, surprised by the directive to cut the provincial government share of legal aid, part of it.
No, I wasn't surprised, just shocked.
Is it a bad cut?
I think it's a bad cut when you stop and talk about the people who will in fact not get service, who have serious legal problems.
Now, how much has been cut?
$625,000 has been cut for the balance of this year, so we have half a year left. We have to bring back out of next year $700,000 that we were going to defer. That gets a little bit technical. And we have to reduce our base level from the government next year to $12.1 million, which is another $1.3 million cut next year.
Now, how much does the government give you a year for legal aid?
The government is intended to give us $13.4 million this year.
And instead of which they're giving you?
They're reducing that by $625,000 now.
And next year?
We're working at $12.1 million.
Working at 12, so that's another serious cut.
That's right.
But is that the total fund available for legal aid?
No, that's about 80% of our funding. We get $2.2 million from the Law Foundation this year.
That's from the lawyers themselves, really?
That's the interest off lawyers' trust accounts, yes.
Right.
We have a bit of surplus funds that we have accumulated from previous years, but we're fully exhausting them this year. And we will draw a bit of interest off the money that we can hold in deposit until we actually spend it, and that will account for about $400,000.
All right, but back to my basic question. Has legal aid not become a form, and I'm being extravagant in this deliberately, but I hear it said all the time now that I'm back in town, not become a form of welfare for lawyers? Has it not protracted the system of justice? I'm not talking about the need for lawyers in your trial, but has it not tended to become a feather-bedded organization?
Well, when you talk about lawyers, you're talking about lawyers in private practice. So feather bedding doesn't mean that there are people on our staff who are doing nothing or we're oversupplying an unmet or an unnecessary need. We pay lawyers in private practice a lot less than they normally charge. And in fact, we're rolling those rates back by 12.5% on October the 1st. It's one of the things we have to do to cope.
You're cutting the rates that lawyers get paid by 12.5%.
That's right, and that's not a rollback of a negotiated increase which was going to come into force. It's an actual cut of something that was in force in September 1981. So we're rolling back actual rates.
How much would that mean? I don't suppose you can give me dollars and cents, but it's a...
Well, I can give you an example of what it costs in terms of cases for lawyers.
Right.
Right now, for a trial, that all of the preparation and initial appearances plus the first half day of a trial, we have been paying $235.
Right.
So we're dropping back to $205 per case there. For a trial which was a case which results in a guilty plea, we have been paying $110. We're dropping that back to about $95. That's what the 12.5% figure is. So they're not high rates.
No,
now,
that's not high.
No.
That's for preparation of a guilty plea, less than $100.
And that could include the initial appearance to fix the date for trial, reviewing the case, talking to the Crown Counsel, and preparing to go to court to speak to sentence.
And the other one, half day, that's the initial preparation and a not guilty plea. In the first half day trial, 235 reduced to 205.
Yes.
Remember, you and I used to do little naggy stories about lawyers. In those days, we were quite appalled, I think, when one lawyer, for instance, hit $50,000 in a year.
Yes, we were.
Yeah, we were. That's not that long ago, is it?
No, and I'm not trying to suggest now that that isn't the case. There certainly are some lawyers who make what appears to be a substantial amount of money from legal aid. Very few, though. There would be about 10 lawyers who made in excess of $40,000 gross from the Legal Services Society last year. And as I say, those are gross figures. They have to deduct their overhead from that.
Now, when you make these cuts, having made these cuts, you actually made these cuts right now.
Most of them will come in on October the 1st, but some of them have been made already, yes.
First of all, let me ask, are you happy with the method of vetting people for legal aid? Or, like one lawyer I was talking to, this lawyer got annoyed when people came in very fancy and expensive clothes, having been vetted by legal aid as being in need of the free legal aid.
Well, in an operation the size that we have, it's inevitable that there's going to be a few people who slip through the system, but I think that we have tightened it up considerably in the last few years. And that includes a much more thorough screening by our own staff. It includes the use of a private investigator to do random sampling, and it includes the use of an investigator on longer cases that we suspect that there may be money available or that we know is going to cost us a large amount of money in any event, and we have to be extremely careful about. So I think in terms of those people who are getting service who are not financially eligible, we're talking about an insignificant proportion.
All right. Now, what is If I'm involved in a criminal trial, a criminal charge right now, touch wood, and what are my standards before I can get legal aid? How low down the economic scale must I be before you'll consider me?
Up until now, we've used a flexible test. If a person can demonstrate that they haven't funds to pay a lawyer after they meet their basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter, then they're eligible for legal aid. Effective October 1st, though, we're using income cutoffs. For a single person, it's $650 a month. That would be after taxes. For a family of 2, it's about $900 a month, and for a family of 4, it's $1,300 a month. Those are the poverty limits established by the National Council on Welfare. If people are above that, it seems ludicrous, I think, but we're forced to say, we think that you're not eligible for legal aid, that somehow you can come up with the money yourself to pay a lawyer.
Did you pick these figures, your Legal Services Society?
We picked those figures because we have to somehow live within this budget. Even picking those figures, we anticipate a $650,000 deficit in our budget by the end of this year.
Well, I must say these are pretty brutal income levels.
I think they are brutal.
$650 a month, if you're getting more than $650 net after your, on your paycheck,
yes,
you don't get legal aid as a single person.
That's right.
$900 a month for a couple.
Yes.
And a family of 4, $1,300 a month.
That's right.
Oi, you really have cut, haven't you?
I don't think there's any doubt about it, and I think we've cut too far, and we're in a terrible squeeze of having to make some judgments about whether we run at our present level until we run out of money.
Gosh, I never thought I'd come round to thinking that the Charter of Rights might be useful. I hate to see the Charter of Rights thrown into every two-bit case in the country, and I'm using that extravagantly too, but you know, every time you see an action, it's the Charter of Rights, the Charter of Rights. But what does the Charter of Rights say about being given a lawyer?
Charter of Rights says two things. It talks about a right to counsel if someone is arrested and detained, and it talks about principles of fundamental justice. Now, principles of fundamental justice is a new phrase, really, in legal terms, and I don't know whether it means due process or exactly what it means. In the United States, the similar phrase, which is due process, has been interpreted to mean that the state can be compelled to provide counsel. Whether that is going to be the law in Canada, nobody knows yet.
We now have the right to retain and instruct counsel in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice, is that it?
Yes.
And of course, be innocent until proven guilty.
Oh, all of those basic rules continue to apply. It's this rather strange phrase about principles of fundamental justice that is really quite vague at the moment and is going to take some case law to give some shape to it.
Yeah, I think you're in a better position than one of the local unions, which has gone to court on the Charter of Rights on the basis that the government is not entitled to cut jobs. But in this case, you can go straight to the Charter of Rights and say, principle of fundamental justice.
I think so, and that's not an argument that we will take. I'm sure that someone that we turn down for legal aid will find a lawyer who brings that case on someone's behalf.
Kind of shocked by what you tell me, to tell you the truth, Brian, because, you know, I always look cynically at the administration of, not all of the administration of justice, but I have various doubts about the whole panoply and delays and whatnot, not in legal aid. More with Brian Rolfe after the break. Brian Rolfe, if I asked you whether a certain person or a certain lawyer is on legal aid, can you tell me, or are you free to tell me?
No, I'm not free to tell you, Jack. We have in our statute, which is called the Legal Services Society Act, a section which says that that information is subject to solicitor-client privilege. So I can't make public whether or not a person is on legal aid or not.
Well, it was just a little thing that I was talking about yesterday with someone. There's a family court matter which has gone on for months and looks like it's gone on for years. Witnesses from all over, at least North America, I understand. And it would be lovely to know how much this is going to cost legal aid. I can't make a judgment as to whether or not it's necessary, but it's a very protracted matter. When you get stuck, if you get stuck in a thing like that, you just have to pay the bills.
We do. We take a look at cases that we find out about that we are unhappy with or where we have some suspicion that there's something going wrong with it. And I don't mean to suggest that we won't look into those things, but I can't make public who's on legal aid and who's not.
Because legal aid, in that case, you're stuck with these costs, regardless, even if the trial does go on for various reasons. It might be the Attorney General, the Superintendent of Child Welfare, legal aid, the parents, or whatever. The bills, as we know in long trials, are horrendous even on legal aid basis.
Yes, they are. Yes, I can't deny that.
So therefore, the cost of legal aid is all. I noticed the Chief Justice the other day, Mr. McKechnie, a couple of months ago, was making some very blunt noises about the delays in the system of justice, about many young lawyers not being quite up to par. Do you agree with his complaints?
Well, I think his complaint was that cases are becoming too long and that we can't afford to have that happen anymore. I'm concerned about that because I think that the cost of that kind of case for average people in our society is becoming prohibitive, and that's a real concern in our system.
But how, when there's a legal establishment, and I mean that in the best way, the whole administration of justice has been just growing like an amoeba now for years, hasn't it? How do you cut back without affecting people's rights? How do you slim down trial or pre-proceedings, whatever you call them?
Well, that's a really complex question which I'm really not, I don't think, fully equipped to answer, but I think we can look at procedures. We can look at pretrial procedures. We can look at the types of motions which are available, the advance notice that people have, the way that things are written down, the disclosure of documents, a whole variety of things relating to information. We can ask questions about whether it's necessary to permit that degree of examination before we get involved in a case, or whether we can't afford to do it anymore.
All right, back to legal aid. How many clients did you have in any last countable period?
For the year ended March 31st, 82, we had 59,000 people come to our offices around the province, 20,000 more coming to the offices of community law offices that we grant funds to.
How many of these would actually get legal aid? That's 80,000 people.
About 42,500 of those had what we would call a longer-term service. That's something beyond a quick interview and a quick assessment.
Yeah, but you will give offhand advice to somebody who comes in and thinks they need legal aid, and you might be able to solve it for them.
That's right. And I think it's important when we talk about that to make it clear that with these limited guidelines, I don't want people to get the impression that they can't at least come for some information about their problems.
Okay, if I'm arrested and I'm in Vancouver City bucket, and I say I want a lawyer.
Yes.
Do you automatically pick me up in the first instance, or must I seek you out?
No, we have what we call a duty counsel program, which is lawyers who are available in the jail at 7 o'clock in the morning to give out information and advice and to speak to bail on behalf of people in their first appearance.
All right, criminal cases, I automatically qualify for legal aid, or do I? I mean, no. I'm not talking about background. I'm making less than $650 a month or whatever.
Right.
I want legal aid in the criminal charge.
If it's a charge under the criminal code, we don't cover them all. We cover indictable offenses, which are the most serious ones. We have been covering summary offenses where there was a possibility of imprisonment. What we're forced to do at the moment is to raise that scale to say there must be a probability of imprisonment in summary offenses before we'll cover it.
I remember doing this with you years ago. If I have a previous criminal record and qualify financially, can I get legal aid?
Yes, you can.
Can I get legal aid for an appeal?
If the appeal has merit. There's no automatic right to appeal.
In other words, the Legal Services Society or the allocated lawyer must act and judge the case in advance of it going back to court.
That's right.
Or judge the case in advance of it before it going to court originally. You might say, no, this is such and such a thing. There is a jail sentence in it, but he's got a clean record, first offense. He can do his own thing in front of his judge.
That's right.
Does anybody appear on their own thing in front of judges?
There are still people appearing on their own, particularly on sentence appeals in the Court of Appeal, and there are people appearing on their own that we have turned down for legal aid at the appeal level.
Oh, of course, one of the smart aleck remarks some of us used to make was, of course, that now with legal aid, nobody ever pleads guilty. They always plead not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, and then change their plea.
Well, that was a joke. It doesn't square with the figures.
It doesn't,
No.
All right, I accept the reprimand. Next question. Criminal matters, properly qualified, possibility of imprisonment, I get legal aid.
Yes.
Right. What about family court cases?
Virtually no legal aid available in family court as of October the 1st. A lot of the services in family court were provided through the Attorney General's ministry, and they were radically cut back on April the 1st. We had been providing some assistance in family court on matters that the Attorney General has not historically covered. We're cutting those back to a very limited number. if there's a protection of children type case, we will assist parents who have to defend an application by the Superintendent of Child Welfare. The only other case that we'll really cover in provincial court in the family area is for a respondent who is facing imprisonment on a show cause hearing for not paying maintenance.
And cases where there is a well-founded threat of physical violence, that's a protection of children thing, is it?
Yes, but even the well-founded violence in family court is not something that we're able to assist with. Now, the Attorney General's ministry should provide lawyers in those cases.
But they've been tightening up on that too, I believe, in some cases.
They've cut back dramatically as of April the 1st.
More with Brian Rolfe. This is an important one. Brian Rolfe, after the break. Well, funny, you know, I was prepared to sit here and be snarky with Brian Rolfe this morning, but I think you've certainly done as much as can be expected to be done. Single person, $650 a month, if that's the net take-home pay. More than that, they can't get legal aid.
That's right.
Family, $900 a month. More than that, they can't get legal aid. Family of 4, $1,300 a month. More than that, they can't get legal aid.
Jack, it's worse than that. We're imposing a user fee on October the 1st as well, so that if there's a case that we're referring out to lawyers, people will have to pay $30. If they're on social assistance, they'll have to pay $10 towards the costs of the case as well.
Oh, how can you do that if somebody's on social assistance?
I don't know, but we're caught in a terrible bind. We have to try to provide some services.
Here's Webster doing a newscast. Welfare cases in British Columbia, when they apply and get for legal aid, must now dig into their welfare check for $10 before the case can go ahead. Is that right?
That's right.
Really? $10 times 42,000. Oh, it saves you $420,000 on last year's load.
Well, that's if it were $10 for every single person. Some of those will be $30. We think that that will raise about $600,000.
Well, I suppose the Charter of Rights, mind you, the Charter of Rights is qualified that anything in the Charter of Rights must kind of reasonably represent the climate and thinking in the country today, mustn't it? There is a qualification provision.
But it's not a qualification which says what our economic position is at the time. It's a much more fundamental kind of limitation than that, and I don't think that our economic condition would limit right to counsel.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Any calls? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jack. Brief story regarding legal aid in Victoria. I was told not to appear by an articling student at a certain court date. She didn't appear on my behalf, and I landed up in jail because of that.
Well, now, surely that's a matter which must have been attended to at some time or another. I mean, after all, you're there responsible for yourself.
I had to leave. You see, I had to leave Victoria, and she told me that she would plead in absentia.
Well,
the court date went by. She never appeared, and
I don't know what the legal position on that is. If it was just a misunderstanding, but if you were not carrying out your appearance, you're almost bound to finish up in jail, isn't it?
My question is that are the legal aid people qualified to appear in absentia when a person is coming up for court date?
Brian?
Do they have to appear or not?
I think you're talking about a summary offense. In a summary offense, a person can appear by agent, which means somebody else can appear on their behalf. Sometimes it can be a lawyer, and that lawyer is appearing in that case as an agent. It sounds like from your example that the agent slipped up, but I can't explain why.
No. Go ahead from Kelowna, please.
Yeah, I was in the legal aid office in Kelowna, which handles, they send a fellow up to Vernon every 2 weeks. And due to the fact that it was a summary conviction on 3 charges, he said legal aid couldn't handle it, but he would be there on Thursday, and if the date was set for Thursday, he would appear for me. He couldn't make it because he had to go to Victoria. He helped me prepare my case and told me there shouldn't be, any problem in getting found not guilty. I went into court in Vernon 15 minutes before lunch. I might as well have not even gone. They had me found guilty, the fines and everything already there. They just ignored every word I said. I couldn't get a word in edgewise what the lawyer told me to say, or nothing.
Well, we can't judge that case, can we? What he was saying may be true, but I don't know.
Well, no, but the thing is that I got fines out of this that's coming out of my $800 a month legal aid.
You got what?
Well, I'm on welfare, and I get $800 a month for my family of 4. Because I didn't have a lawyer, I got found guilty. The $400 in fines that I was assessed with because I couldn't get a word in edgewise come out of my welfare check, and I don't know what I'm going to feed my kids on.
Well, that's one of the results of our cutbacks. There's no question about it. In your particular case, I don't know whether you've had advice, but you should know that you can apply to the court for more time to pay. So if you can't pay your fines, go back to the court, make an application to have that time extended.
Could they not make an application and just extend it?
They gave me time to pay till November. But what I was trying to get across is, and if they're cutting back on legal aid, and you can't get legal aid as it is on matters that, I mean, you can't go to jail, but if I can't pay these fines, then I'm going to go to jail, aren't I?
Yes, you are. And our population is going up considerably in the jails for people who are not paying fines.
Listen, we had an act, did we not, which prevented people going to jail in some categories for not paying fines. NDP brought it in.
Yes, they did, but that only applies to provincial offenses. So any conviction under the criminal code, that doesn't apply to.
Never did apply to.
Never did. And if you don't pay your fine, then you'll be committed to prison for the time that the judge has sentenced you to.
$500 or 20 or 30 days.
Yes.
Well, if you're on welfare and you can't pay a fine for a summary conviction or driving with no insurance or undue care and attention or anything like that, if you're on welfare and you can't pay your fine, can they put you in jail?
Yes, if you haven't paid it by the due time. But you can go back to court to ask for more time, and you should do that. The real problem arises because people often don't know they can do that.
Well, okay, they told me I could pay it by November.
Well, just a minute. How many kids have you got?
I got 2 kids.
Does your wife work?
No, she doesn't.
$800 a month on welfare.
$880.
$880 plus your children's allowance.
Yeah, plus the family allowance.
Far be it from me, but can you make a gesture? Can you give a court $5 a month, Brian?
Well, this is what I was going to say. If I go in on November and I have $75 out of the $150 fine, can I pay the $75 and ask for more time to pay the remainder?
I can't tell you for sure, but that's clearly something that the judge can take into account, and I think in a case like that, that would impress the judge.
I'm sure it would. I'm sure if you gave him $50 and said, I'll try and pay the rest in every second month, that he'd go for it. You can't, if you're any kind of reasonable person trying to carry out your duty as a citizen, even if you were guilty, it's not likely you're going to be jailed on welfare for only paying part of your fine.
One other thing I'd like to say before I go, Jack, is the legal aid counselor that I was talking to couldn't handle my case, but he said that he would take it. You know, if he was there, he would go in on his own time.
He tried to help you.
He tried to help me. He definitely did, and it was very much appreciated what they did do. And
let me know how you get on. Let me know how you get on.
Will do, Jack.
Right. After the break. I'm going to use Ryton first part. The other day, I told you the plight of a man called Carlisle Ryton, a 40-year-old Penticton man in the film processing business, who did not deal with summonses and default judgments obtained in the French language from the federal court in Quebec. As a result of that, he appeared in federal court in Vancouver yesterday. Basically, the circumstances he faces are that a Quebec company demanded he change the name of his business because it was too close to theirs. Direct Film Processing of Penticton versus Direct Film Inc. of Quebec. In August 81, he received the claim in French. And then a federal court document ruling, asking a federal court judge to make him change the name of his business. In early November, he got a summons to court in the French language. He didn't respond to it. He said he couldn't get it translated. He failed to respond to the French document. The company asked the court to issue a default judgment, which it did. And as a matter of fact, he says he received the summons to appear in Montreal 2 days after the court hearing. The default judgment is that he must follow the injunction to stop using the name of Direct Film, that he was liable for court costs and faces potential damages claimed by the other company not awarded of $45,000. Now, he was, again, because he didn't attend the default judgment, found in contempt. This time yesterday, in order to appear in Vancouver Federal Court to show cause why he shouldn't be held in contempt, possibility of a $5,000 fine and a year in jail. Yesterday, Ryton appeared in court in Vancouver, the federal court. The judge came from Ottawa. There were 2 translators, a technician to operate the translation equipment, because the lawyer from Quebec was using French. During the trial, Ryton refused to wear the earplug to hear the English translation. The judge has told Ryton that before his motion to set aside the default judgment can be heard, he must pay a fair amount of costs into court before that can be considered. During the trial, Ryton objected to the use of the French language in the official court documents in his case. The judge told him that the Official Languages Act specifies only that either of the 2 official languages must be used. It's a complex case. I bring it to your attention. I'm taking no position on the rights or wrongs or anything. I'm just telling you what has happened. He got the documents in French. He didn't have them translated, said he couldn't have them translated because he didn't appear in court in Quebec, and he said he didn't get the subpoena to appear until the day after he was due to appear. He has been found in contempt, and he is being asked to show cause why he should not perhaps be involved in these damages and have to go to jail for contempt. I had to follow that up, Brian. I hope you'll forgive me. I wanted to ask you, funny, we got off legal aid onto another aspect altogether. Of those who go to jail in British Columbia, how many are for non-payment of fines?
20% of the people are the latest figures that I've seen.
20% of the provincial prison population are...
The admissions to prison right now, 20% of the people going in are going because they haven't paid fines.
They have been fined with an option in jail.
Yes.
They haven't paid fines.
Yes.
And the jail options are being picked up.
That's correct. They've run out of time.
Any idea what the numbers would be of 20%? Perhaps we shouldn't guess.
I don't know that figure off the top of my head, Jack.
But that's an obtainable official figure.
Oh, yes, and those are figures that are available through the Attorney General's ministry.
In Victoria?
Yes.
Well, we'll find out what the actual score is. Take another call. I'm really quite shocked by the low level of income for legal aid.
So am I.
How much? Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Brian.
Yep. Go ahead,
Good
sir.
morning.
While there is a problem with the Family Relations Act stuff in terms of the cutback by the Attorney General, one which bothers me more is the seeming inability for over the last 8 months to a year of getting any legal aid for juvenile cases appearing in court on criminal charges. And as you're aware, these juveniles can, on indictable offenses, go to jail for up to 2 years. And we do not seem to get any legal aid at all for them. And my question is, has that been cut out entirely?
No, we will still provide legal aid to juveniles on about the same basis that we will to adults. So generally speaking, if it's a serious offense for the juvenile can get legal aid.
Well, we've been turned down on many occasions.
Who are we? Can I ask you? You perhaps don't want to identify yourself, but who are we have been turned down?
Well, the probation department and applying on behalf of juveniles for legal aid.
The juvenile has a right to appeal the denial of legal aid, and that appeal can be made to me as the executive director, and I think you should follow that route.
Will do, thank you.
Thank you very much for the call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was inquiring about the proper legal representation, where the lawyers come from, in how they are
How are lawyers picked for legal aid?
where the lawyers come from.
They come from...
I've had fault at law cases, and I was wondering why the lawyers did not properly represent me.
No, you can't judge that, neither can I. If you've got a complaint about legal aid, address it to Brian Ralph at his office in downtown Vancouver. Where is your office now?
It's at 555 West Hastings Street. That's
and where's
our head
the legal
office.
aid office?
Our office for clients is in Gastown at 191 Alexander Street, corner of Alexander and Main.
I sometimes forget there are whole new generations of people who have not heard us or people like us doing rundowns on legal aid. In what other towns do you have offices for legal aid?
We've got full-time offices in 16 places around the province. We also have community law offices that are independent, but we grant funds to them, and they're located in another 10 locations.
In other words, any lawyer in any phone book in any part of the province can tell people where the legal aid or the community law office advice can be given.
That's right.
Well, I hope that you will keep me in touch with the developments as you refuse more and more cases with perhaps consequent real injustices to ordinary people.
I will, Jack.
My thanks to Brian Rolfe. I'll be back after the break. I wouldn't mind hearing from people about to go to jail for non-payment of fines. Mind you, some of you probably should have paid them. Phone Mark on the Webster show, Mark Schneider, or write me a letter. And we'll try to find out officially from corrections system in the Attorney General's Department. 20% of people going to jail for non-payment of fines? Now, Monday morning, a couple of politicians lined up for the moment. I've got Brian Westwood. Whatever became of Brian Westwood, and also Stu Leggett of the NDP, and other breaking stories. 9 a.m. precisely.
The minister interfered with our strategy without consulting with us and essentially sold out to the strategists of the BC Teachers Federation.
And double-crossed your deal.
Exactly.
If the membership votes no on your personal recommendation, what will you do, John Fryer?
I shall resign.
You shall what?
I shall resign.
The best supporting actor.
Ed Broadbent for the movie Reds. It's a story of an angry but caring socialist who will do anything for the workers except become one. There were a couple of late entries. Lies My Father Told Me by Bill Bennett.